One of my first musical idols when I was a young trumpet player was Maynard Ferguson. I remember being 12 or 13 years old, listening to Maynard and straining to hit those high notes that of course I would never hit, but were the dream of every young trumpet player. I picked up the record Message from Birdland. I think it was the first jazz record I ever bought, and it blew the top of my head off. To this day, that music still captivates me. And then when I was, I guess, 14 or 15, I got to hear Maynard's big band live. Just an incredible experience to hear that band and to hear Maynard.
So far, I just feel good and enjoy the music, and I enjoy the whole thing that I do, perhaps even more now. It's unfortunate we call them clinics, and yet I know that master class sounds pompous and all that, but clinic sounds like there's something wrong with the kids, you know. You better go to the clinic and get that taken care of, that B-flat minor 7. If we were dealing in the old game called careers, I would say the fame cards came awfully late for Clark Terry, because I always thought of him as one of the great, in spite of my chops and what people say about my chops, I always said, well, I think the perfect embouchure is really Clark Terry's, and it's a natural one. He doesn't have a callus like a working man's hand like I do, and things of that nature. And when I'm doing my teaching and my master class things, I'm right in there about Clark a lot in terms of who to emulate. Do you remember when he used to go from flugelhorn to trumpet? And it made no difference to him. My brain always clicked, even though I used to go French horn, baritone horn, trombone, trumpet, you know. And funny thing is, it was only in recent years I added the flugelhorn, which is normally the first instrument a trumpet player starts to double on, you know. But I was into the saxophone because my brother was a fine saxophonist, and we used to play duets together when we were kids. So I still play the soprano when I'm doing any of the Indian-orientated things. But Clifford Brown, I consider one of the most. Both of those guys were lyrical. That's what I loved about their playing, and both were very creative, and you could. What I love about jazz music is because I've said all the same nice things about both of those guys. They don't sound alike at all to me, you know. And Sri Sathya Sai Baba once said, "It is better to not bother blessing the instrument that you've invented. Better to bless the player," you know. So even though their musical thoughts, I think, were very much the same, and yet you didn't listen to Clifford and say, "Oh, there's Clark's got a new album out," you know. Even though I never was that great at those Leonard Feather blindfold tests, you know. Eventually I'd get corralled and have to do one. Miles, you know, because at Birdland, well, we were usually on the same bill. They always had two attractions, so it would be Maynard Ferguson and his Birdland Dream Band in those days. And on the other side would be Miles Davis, with Coltrane and Cannonball and Philly Joe Jones and Paul Chambers, et cetera, and it was just marvelous. So intermissions, my band usually did not go upstairs to the bar. It was really fun to be on the same bill. If it was somebody that you didn't care that much for, half the band would be at the bar upstairs, And but Miles was great to play with, and was a great friend of mine, in spite of all the stories you hear. When he found out once, oh yeah, I love this. When he found out once that I was about 1/8 Cognawaga in India, and that's a Canadian small tribe, he said, I knew you weren't all white. I knew there was some reason I just love you, And that's Miles Davis, man, And I could tell you Miles Davis, because, like when you do 5 sets a night, even though they're on while you're off and all night, eventually you really get to know each other, And one of the stories that was wild that I can tell is one about a very nicely dressed man in the table section of Birdland, of course, with his son, who was almost dressed identically with the shirt, the tie, the whole thing. And Miles was waiting, no wasted time with Pee Wee Marquette at Birdland, when one band stopped, the other one had 5 minutes and they hit, And even if there was 4 guys missing, my band, I was pretty lucky about that. But anyway, this guy, so Miles and I were sort of standing together. He had just come off, and I was waiting to go on. There's just that 5 minutes, and this man rushes up with his 11-year-old son and says, Mr. Davis, I've always been a fan of yours. I have all your records. And Miles was nice, and he said, oh, thank you. He said, would you say hello to my son? And Miles was just as gracious as could be, and he held out his hand, and the kid sort of whacked his hand. He was kind of cocky, and grabbed his hand, and said, yeah, wild, Miles. Hey, something? You never played better. And Miles looked at him and said, hey, kid, how the hell would you know? And that is Miles Davis. And while I was aghast, because you saw the father's face drop, the kid looked funny, and then Miles walked right away, but he grabbed me by the arm. And right near there's the waiter's door and where the band room is. He grabbed me, and he was hysterical in laughter. He never thought of it in terms of any sort of negative output. It was just him really having fun. When I lived in England, I would sit with the Indian musicians and play with them. And when I played for Sai Baba in India, I can assure you I didn't have any smoking blues rhythm section. I had tabla players, I had mridangam players, tamburi, veena, all the Indian instruments, And so I would play with them. So at times I would be the teacher, and then a lot of times I'd be the student, when they get into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all these kind of rhythms and stuff, that's where we become the amateurs. I got into it through being interested in Indian music. After a few years of going there, for, like I say, a month and a half, he suddenly came to me in his orange robe and everything, and it's not one of those, hand me all your credit cards and your checkbook and I'll show you God. None of that's going on, 2 things. First of all, he says, do not evangelize. So on my time here with this camera, you won't catch me saying, you really ought to check it out, I don't like that. Or what he says, if you come to me, and I love this, if you come to me, he says, come to me and leave better at what you already are. You know, in other words, don't make him, I won't be a Catholic anymore. I'll be a Sai Baba devotee. Seems like this is what I was meant to do. I love presenting all these young, great players, and I always say, if you're going to leave my band, I'll only be mad at you if you're not a big success.
This is Bret Primack, the jazz video guy. Thanks for helping us keep jazz from becoming invisible.